Have you ever played a video game that just made you think, man, what am I doing with my life? Well, the PS1 is full of titles like that, with its massive library of games. Of course, there are the classics that everyone loves. But once you start digging a little further, you'll find some that really don't belong here. From cinematic survival adventures to bizarre minigame collections to whatever this is supposed to be, the PS1 is full of hidden gems, many of which are still stuck in the land of the rising sun. So today, we're going to be diving back into even more of the weirdest Japanese PS1 games out there. And the best part is, many of the titles featured in today's video have been fan-translated into English, which means you can actually try them out for yourself today. Let's get into it. First up is UFO, A Day in the Life, and yep, that's a floating metallic mouth alright. This was developed by Love Delic and released in 1999. You play as an alien investigator who looks like a chicken, and you hear about a group of 50 other aliens who've been stranded on Earth after crash landing into an apartment building, and it's your job to go down and rescue them. The only issue is the aliens are invisible because plot. So you have to visit each location and scan for traces of them using your head, which is also a cosmic camera thing. And once you're done taking pictures, you're sent back to the mothership, and Chrome Lips will eat your photos and develop them for you, which will reveal whether or not you've discovered a new alien to rescue. The presentation is very bizarre, and the characters just look so strange, almost surreal. The atmosphere is also really interesting, but once the novelty of the world itself wears off, the gameplay really starts to drag. Movement can feel pretty sluggish in larger areas, and the snapshot window is so smooth. If an alien isn't perfectly framed, it won't count. There are clues in the various levels, like cats hissing in the distance at something invisible, but even then, a lot of the aliens just can't be rescued unless you take a photo during an oddly specific moment. Like this stupid Christmas tree with googly eyes who can't even be rescued unless you take a photo of him at 5 a.m. right when this blonde guy with a dumb-looking nose waters him. And on top of that, you won't see the results of your session until you go back to the mothership to get them developed. If the photos aren't perfect, well, you gotta go back and do the whole thing over again and again until you get it right. It's an interesting concept with a cool atmosphere and crazy looking character designs, but as a game, I really don't think I can recommend it for more than a few minutes.
Sucks ass!
Next up is a viewer submission.
Cyber-Org.
This was developed by Fuzzbox and published by Squaresoft. A lot of the game is already in English actually, which makes it hard to believe that this wasn't released outside of Japan. Maybe the devs just thought English was cool and decided to sprinkle it in.
Get strong.
The game features a bunch of characters like
Faucis, Chief Sheriff Z3, Gigante, Planet Enorme,
and
Mike, the pilot.
No, wait, hang on a minute. What? You're telling me this thing is named Mike? Really? That's the best you could do? Can you imagine what would happen if every developer designed their characters like this? Hey, Mr. Miyamoto, what do you think we should name our stupid alien monkey thing? Oh, I don't know. How about John Smith? I mean, who gives a shit, right? Anyway, the game lets you choose between multiple characters who each have their own unique abilities. And right away, the controls feel surprisingly smooth. It has full DualShock support, something that a lot of other games we've looked at definitely could have benefited from, and the movement feels very responsive. The camera is also not inverted, so it feels very intuitive and surprisingly modern for a PS1 game. The gameplay involves exploring maze-like dungeons and wiping out enemies. It kinda reminded me of the underground sections in Mega Man Legends, just not as interesting. The combat itself is also very straightforward. You have a primary attack with the square button that lets you do strings of melee attacks, and a secondary attack which differs between characters. It overall feels fine, but I do wish there was just a little more complexity here. Locking on is also a bit awkward as it often makes you move much slower than the enemies that are zipping around. But the game is easy enough that it never really becomes that much of a problem. If you want to switch characters, you have to either swap them out at designated points in the game, or select them from the overworld menu and navigate through the dungeons you've already cleared with the previous character and catch up with the rest of your team. I think they wanted to encourage players to experiment more with the different characters, but honestly, this just made things feel a little repetitive. Still, the presentation is decent and the soundtrack is actually pretty good with lots of cheesy rock music. The game is also pretty easy to jump into even without much understanding of Japanese, so I would still recommend at least giving this one a try. Next up is or as it's been fan-translated as, "They're here." This is one that I've seen sitting on the shelf at my local used game store for years, but never got around to picking up. Turns out, it's a first-person survival horror game set in a Japanese high school. The students are preparing for the school festival, when they're locked in overnight and spooky things start to happen. You know, I don't really watch a lot of horror movies, but do the monsters usually drink people, or is this more of a Japanese thing? Because I've seen other games that do literally the same thing. I won't spoil the story, but it is very predictable and gets progressively more ridiculous towards the end. And speaking of endings, the game has a few of them depending on your actions, and the whole thing can be cleared in a few hours. The atmosphere is pretty good, and the dark lighting definitely does a lot to make things feel more ominous. The character models are also pretty simple, but it's enough to get the job done. I was also impressed to see reflections in the bathroom mirrors. I feel like this isn't something you see too often in PS1 titles, and I thought it was a neat touch. The game is essentially a walking simulator, and the controls feel really clunky. You have to use the triggers to move the camera up and down, and movement can feel pretty slow. To progress through the game, you have to wander around the school and talk to the various characters to trigger events and advance the story. This can be very time-consuming and unnecessarily difficult to figure out. The game often doesn't tell you where you should go next, and the NPCs move around a lot, and you have to speak to the right character in exactly the right order. If you don't do this, you won't be able to progress the story, and you're going to be wandering around like a stupid jackass for hours like I did. The high school is also really big, and it can be difficult to remember where certain rooms are. However, the instruction manual does include a map of the building, and I'd highly recommend using this or looking it up for when you play. This gameplay loop also undermines the scary atmosphere a little bit, since you know that realistically nothing can happen to you until you trigger the next event in the game. Combine this with the weird controls, and the whole experience just feels much more tedious than it needs to be, which is a shame because I did actually begin to enjoy the story and all the goopy monsters. The game is also pretty short, and it can be cleared in just a few hours, so even if it's not the greatest horror game out there, it might still be worth giving a shot, especially since there's a translation patch that you can use to play it in English. The next game we're going to be looking at is
Milano No Arbeit Collection,
or Milano's Odd Job Collection. The game is developed by just Victor. Okay. This one's a bit obscure and can be a little pricey in Japan's used game market. On the surface, it's a simple minigame collection, but this also has the added twist of being a life sim. You play as Milano, an 11-year-old elementary school student on summer vacation. Her mom is hospitalized, and so Milano stays with her uncle in Zucchini Town. Yes, that's the name of the town, but he's on vacation, so she has the house all to herself for 40 days. Which is really questionable. So, naturally, Milano decides to work a bunch of part-time jobs because nothing says fun vacation quite like child labor. The art style is great, it's really colorful and features very detailed sprite work and animation. It reminded me a lot of Harmful Park's aesthetic, and I really enjoyed its charming atmosphere. Gameplay is a mix of minigames and life sim elements. During the day, you pick a job to do. These range from serving yellow hedgehog things at McDonald's to milking a bunch of flying cows while being chased by a chicken and whatever this is supposed to be. They're pretty ridiculous, but I do like how the developers tried to make these otherwise mundane tasks as fun and interesting as possible. I was also confused about not being able to select a harder difficulty at first, but it turns out this is related to the game's life simulator aspect. At the start of the game, Milano is basically brain dead, meaning you can only take on simple tasks. To fix that, you have to raise her knowledge stat, which can only be done by saving your money and ordering a desk. Then, you have to wait a few days for it to arrive, then physically place it in your room and study at the end of the day. It's a really weird level of detail that I was not expecting at all, but leveling up your character and doing all the non-minigame stuff does go a long way in adding depth and replay value here. I normally don't care too much for minigame collections, but I will admit, I found myself enjoying this one much more than I was expecting. It's a quirky hidden gem on the system, and you should definitely check it out, especially since it's been recently announced that an English re-release will be coming to modern consoles later this year. Lastly is
Aconcagua.
this title was developed by and released exclusively in Japan in 2000. The game is pretty story heavy and begins on an airplane flying over the fictional country of Meruza, which is currently in the middle of a tense political situation. On board is one of the key figures,
Pachamama! Pachamama!
and hidden inside the plane is a bomb, which explodes and causes the plane to crash land deep in the mountains. A few passengers survive, but the bad guys are hunting them down. Your goal is to band together with the survivors and work your way down the mountain and escape. The presentation is surprisingly good here.
Shit!
The cutscenes are very cinematic and the voice acting is pretty good.
This has been planned from the beginning. You've got to reveal the truth. Okay, don't talk anymore.
And much like CyberOrg, the cutscenes are in English, while the captions are in Japanese. But luckily, there's a fan-translated patch available for this one. The game was originally planned to be released in the US, but was mysteriously cancelled for some reason. And seeing this first cutscene really did make me wonder, why wasn't this released internationally? And then, the gameplay started. Oh no, it's one of these. So I was initially disappointed with the control scheme. Instead of directly moving your character, you have to guide him around with a cursor. It's honestly not that bad and you do get used to it, but considering the fixed camera angles that resemble early survival horror games on the system, I can't help but feel tank controls would have been better here. But still, it works fine. My only gripe is that interacting with objects can sometimes be really clunky. You have to stand in exactly the right spot and have the right camera angle to be able to interact with things, and using the cursor instead of just moving the character directly can make precise movements unnecessarily difficult. The main gimmick of the game is your ability to switch between characters. Each one has their own inventory and unique abilities. The levels are full of puzzles where you have to work as a team and trade items, split tasks, and use the right person at the right time. It's like opening doors in LEGO Star Wars, but for grown-ups.
Shit!
After spending a few hours with this game, I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed it. If you liked the puzzles in the original Resident Evil games, I think you're gonna love this one. The visuals hold up really well for a PS1 title, and overall, the atmosphere is very immersive. I feel like if it did get an international release, it would have definitely gained a cult following. This game is a must-try, and is without a doubt
Top quality beefsteaks.
Whoa!
And there you have it, yet another batch of the strangest PlayStation games to crawl out of Japan. And the crazy part is, even after 4 videos, we've still only just scratched the surface here. There are still so many obscure titles out there just waiting to be discovered. So if you've got a weird game you'd like to see featured in a future video, drop it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the PS1, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you in the next video. Later.